everyone. How you all doing? Hope you're doing okay. I have got an incredibly dynamic speaker for you now. MESELA NHLAPO is the CEO of the African Rail Industry Association, woman after my own heart, managing an association. It's not for the faint-hearted, is for sure. We love, cherish and adore our members, and we also have to keep abreast with all the current trends and changes, etc., etc. So we're really, really grateful for her to be here today to share her knowledge on what's an incredibly important topic for us in South Africa. And we've got a lot of work that needs to be done on this, and we look forward to hearing from you, MESELA. So I'm going to shut myself off and leave you to it.
Good afternoon. I hope everybody can hear me. My name is MESELA NHLAPO, and I am quite honored to be invited and share the visionary skills of the railway sector and how it can transform, and relying on the supply chain industry to transform the industry and to be able to grow the economy. We can't grow the economy as the rail sector, but the supply chain is the backbone of any industry. And I'd like to share my presentation. So, they say rail PPP opportunities in South Africa, private-public partnerships. I think it's time as South Africans and government, we stop talking past each other, but rather to each other. And so, just to recap, the rail industry in South Africa is poised for change. And it is the only way that we will be able to grow as an economy, particularly after the pandemic, and as one of the few policies that would, decrease unemployment and create new opportunities. I'm going to provide a little bit of a background and the context of third-party access. And then I'll also discuss the branch line concessions, as we have previously seen before from one of the state-owned entities. So the rail industry in South Africa is under serious duress. Those that work for the SOEs would know that the likes of PRASA have not, in the past few years, spent their capex and opex, and that has had a significant impact on the rail manufacturing sector, the rail services sector in general. Unfortunately, with all this history that we have not taken up the lead within the region and to the entire continent. We have over 36,000 kilometers of track installed, which is worth than 1.5 trillion, which is about 80% of the entire continent rail track. So we can see the impact, or rather how huge the rail industry and how rich the rail history is in South Africa, and also translate into the expertise that we have, that we could share with our brothers and sisters on the continent. Yes, the industry is under duress. For Transnet, we're expecting from 2019, there has been a general decline of the general freight, and we expect that for the 2020 result, there'll be a further decline. With PRASA having lost a significant passengers in their service offering, we know that their mandate is to offer safe services, logistics services, and I think for the past few years we have seen that the train station have been vandalized, and there's been absolutely, as little as possible in terms of services. including the president being stuck somewhere in the train around Pretoria. Now, the impact of this is that when the board and the executive do not spend money, you have your supply chain specialists idling around, because if money or rather resources have not been made available, even if they're available, it has an impact on supply chain and its professionals, and therefore a frustration of some sort that comes through. The vandalism over the lockdown left the industry in paralysis. But my view and my personal view in this instance is that if I have a car, it's my asset. It is my duty to protect my asset. So there may have been a little bit of negligence from the asset owners, whether it's level 5 or level 10. The security of the assets does not downplay the importance of it. So if the level 5 came with a neglect of the system, it's a problem. There's been a widespread of liquidation and retrenchment. Now, how would this affect the supply chain in order for supply chain to make technical informed decision? Is that any Tom, Dick, and Harry will come and claim that they can perform certain type of work, whereas those companies that have been long in the industry, that are known to provide, or at least are experienced to provide a certain service, those companies disappear. One may argue that those companies refuse to transform, and we can confirm that most companies actually that have liquidated are Black-owned companies. Those companies that have been liquidated are Black women-owned companies. Those were SMMEs that could not survive the politics of the state-owned entities. We know that there's been a widespread corruption on the 1064 locomotive program. The Shifambo leasing contract has been cancelled. Shifambo is the so-called toll trains. And I wish to place it on record that those locomotives are one of the best locomotives in the world. That's how high quality that locomotive is. There's currently a conversation that is taking place between the OEM and PRASA to do a little bit of modification. Now, after many years later, cancellation of a contract, lawyers making money, we're now looking at solutions. We have seen a significant number of insourcing in state-owned entities. Now, traditionally, the likes of TE were to manufacture, but they would feed the industry at the same time. And hence, we had a strong supply manufacturing companies and services companies. But once the state start competing with private sector, it's a problem. Then private sector needs to rely on exporting. Those that have the balance sheet to export will be able to export and sustain themselves for a significant number of years. But those that are new entrants into the market will be significantly disadvantaged. But having said that, as an optimistic that I am, there's a new structural reform. And a structural reform is not what monopoly capital, as some people like to call it, or rather privatizing. But structural reform is a reform that need to take change to shape how South Africa will look, to shape how do we turn around this economy. As I've said, the South African network is about 36,000 kilometers, 23,000 route kilometers. But we are also equivalent to the infrastructure of Germany. Now, that is something for us as South Africans to be proud of. The freight volumes, particularly for the general freight, you can see that from 1949, 1950, there has been an increase, an incline in terms of the freight market. But the general freight market around 1974, 1975, that is when, before I was born, there's been a steady decline. But what we know is that on the iron ore line and the coal link, there's been an increase. So this is where Transnet, these are two routes that are profitable for Transnet and have reached capacity. We as the rail sector, at least private sector, we are not in the business of competing with Transnet, but rather to assist them where they are lacking in terms of availability of rolling stock and areas that are generally not being serviced anymore, including your forestry and agricultural market. Now, third-party access. This is the structural reform. This is the exciting part in the rail industry. It gives us hope. It gives a man in the street that recently lost their job that there is hope. There is a hope that I can regain my dignity back through having a sustainable employment. We cannot, all of us, be entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is for the crazy ones. And some of us have to be part of the system because we are good at a particular thing. Now, the development of government policy, it has always been proposed that the introduction of private sector, or at least a greater participation of private sector to the core network should be implemented. This comes from the draft white paper. Already there's introduction of third-party access in there. And then there's also a national treasury document, the famous 77-page documents towards an economic strategy for South Africa. I think it's important to highlight that any developing country that its logistic services are not the best, or at least compared to the best of the world, you cannot have economic growth in that industry or in that economy. And then 2020, we had the Department of Transport bringing on the Economic Regulation Transport Bill. Once this, the STAIR legislation, as I would like to call it, it was first introduced in the white paper, the draft white paper, but we have the economic regulation coming in first and leaving behind the national rail policy. And in 2020, His Excellency, I would like to call him, President Ramaphosa, on the 15th of October 2020, in his speech where he delivered to Cabinet, he said, and I quote, "We will be allowing third-party access onto the core network." The Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan proposed a deadline of 12 months for its introduction. We are now in August, and we hope somehow that the president is keeping a timeline on some of the commitments that he has made. Then there is Operation Windela, which is an operation that is run from the presidency's office and the deputy minister at Treasury to implement structural reform. As a nation, we have, let's say, top three priorities. Priority number one is water sanitation or water in general. And then two is energy, and three is transport. So the complete structural reform of the logistics sector in South Africa is not a nice to have. It must be put in place as soon as possible. Now, the key question is that will this have a meaningful impact on unlocking growth? Absolutely. Imagine if the trucks that are on the road, the freight that's supposed to be on rail moves on rail. That will unlock economic growth, not particularly from the export and import point of view, but also the manufacturing sector will start growing as well in the services center. Does it require significant state invest or physical support? Absolutely not. All the money went to COVID. And as a matter of fact, most African governments do not have money to invest in infrastructure. That's why we find ourselves in stranglehold relationship with certain countries where we have no say when it comes to investment of infrastructure or how we're going to grow the economy. They will bring you money, they will bring you equipment, they will even bring you people that are going to execute the project. And the natives, or rather the indigenous people of that country, South African people, will be excluded as part of growing the industry. Is it value generative to the state? Absolutely. If third-party access were to be allowed today, a third-party operator will then pay an access fee to Transnet. Then that will be a new revenue stream for Transnet. And to support my statement of a new revenue stream, Tazara, of which is a joint venture between Tanzania and Zambia, have recently reported that 25% of their revenue will be derived from third-party access, and they're actively encouraging their executives to complete the contracts that are outstanding as soon as possible. Which sectors upstream industry will benefit? Mining, forestry, agricultural sector will significantly benefit from this. Few years ago, we had the agri sector where the grain silos were linked to the railways. But now, all that grain, or at least 80% of that, is now on the road. The agricultural sector are supporting third-party access because they realize that it will have an impact on their bottom line. At the end of the day, business is in business to make money. We are not a charity organization. So any structural reform that has a positive contribution on our businesses will positively support it. What is required to make it happen? Well, with our research, that the study that we have initiated, we anticipating that there is nothing in law that prevents third-party access to be implemented today. And also the study that we have embarked on, it looks at the figures that for the freight market, for the rail-centric bulk freight market, excluding iron ore and coal, because these are lines that have reached their full capacity and there is no opportunities for private sector in those markets. And then it is estimated that 45 billion rands in rolling stock alone will be required to service this volume requirement. Now, the private operators have committed to procure locally because they understand the importance of growing this industry. The manufacturing sector will be revitalized again. But what is important, and where it plays a role in terms of bringing in this investment, is a structural reform that we're looking at. State investment, we say, well, as little as possible. Rather, we prefer that structural reform and introduction of certain private law policies. The coal and iron ore, the red being the coal, and which are lines that are actually being run by Transnet at the moment, Transnet Freight Rail, are of no interest to us. But the green lines are those green lines that may be available to private sector. Is there any investment required before this third-party access policy is put in place? No extra investment, just to open up the industry, open up the core network. There is a massive network with excessive capacity. Now, private operators, as I've said before, they are willing to pay access fees when utilizing the network. Actually, internationally, as in the case of Tanzania, you've seen an increase in revenue once third-party access is introduced. Track maintenance costs should be largely fixed, and I think that the track maintenance cost is some of the areas that Transnet may be having concerns about, but our team at Weber Wenzel, that is our legal counsel, has advised us that those costs should be largely as the same as they are today, because it's their asset. They have to maintain the asset anyway. They don't see why there should be concerns around cost today, because the cost has always been there for the track or other the facilities to be maintained. If we have third-party access, it will then be a start of the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, therefore increasing intra-Africa trade. There is already proof from Tazara that this can work between the two countries. Now, as South Africa, with our many, many years of experience in the railway sector, we're still inward looking, whilst our neighbors are taking advantage of our inward looking. And in most cases, we are arrogant. We think we know better. But over the years, we have seen that our neighbors are going to surpass us and therefore disadvantage us and possibly take business away from us. We need to open up the market. We need to open up to go into the region. There is no way that we can increase intra-Africa trade without a strong logistic policy that is based on increasing and encouraging economic growth in this country. Now, the key sectors to benefit, as I've alluded earlier, is agriculture. We had engagements with Agri-SA recently, and they've expressed a need to support ARIA and in terms of lobbying government to deliver on third-party access. In some conversation, the customer, being the agricultural sector, may have been asked that you procure your own rolling stock. And then the client says, but I'm not in the business of rolling stock. And then this is where the opportunities are that come with third-party access. If I'm able to service agriculture, then I can lease or at least make rolling stock available to them as and when it is required. Minerals, steel and cement, we know that there's a huge demand to move cement off road onto rail. Cars and containers, Transnet recently signed a deal with Ford, and I think there's an opportunity for third-party access and different hazardous chemicals. The rest locals benefit, as I said earlier on, manufacturing. There will be an increase in revitalizing the manufacturing sector that has suffered greatly because of some of the shenanigans that have taken place at the only two clients. So this structural reform does not only talk to having third-party access, but it's also a game changer in terms of MESELA as a manufacturing company or a services company not relying on Transnet and PRASA. We have seen recently that if that is the case, the industry crumbles. So we need third-party access to maintain what we have, to protect our businesses, to protect the manufacturing sector of this country. In terms of financing, there's a huge capacity. We're working with RMB and APSA, and most of the finance world are actually quite interested in this market because they'll be able to fund some of the rolling stock requirements on the basis that there's certainty in the policy, there's certainty in third-party access, there's certainty in delivering and increasing logistics requirements to grow the industry and the economy of the country. Specialist advisors, the lawyers will be the ones that will draft your access agreement, ensure that there is transparency for third-party access contracts and also access fees, ensure that everybody is treated the same. We need to have rail-centric hubs that are set to target rail efficiency. Without an efficient logistics sector, we can't grow this economy. What is needed to put in third-party access? There is no new regulation that is required. This has been confirmed by legal counsel Weber Wenzel. This has also been confirmed by the railway safety regulator. The economic regulator will be of great support, yes, but we don't need to have a rail economic regulator to be in place. With the fantastic competition laws we have in the country, that should be sufficient support, at least for now. Access agreement, we need access agreements, and there's nothing preventing Transnet at the moment to enter into access agreements with the industry. Now, talk about branch line concession. They were first announced about, say, 10 years ago. However, there has been very little progress, and the little progress may be attributed to some of the terms and conditions that are in such contracts, and it has previously not worked. We know that there is a certain Black women-owned companies that were quite excited in winning the tender for concessioning, branch line concessioning. Didn't end up well. So the contract itself is not in the best interest of the other party. So the contract itself, is not economic. You find that most companies do not even tender because it's a waste of time to go and contract on the basis that are in the tender. But when the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan was announced, we thought that this is a great structural reform where the industry can benefit outside the branch line concessioning, that some of the branch lines are actually not economic at all. Now, when I say branch lines, is that, okay, the Orex is in red. So this is completely has reached capacity. So we're not interested in that. So the black lines are your branch lines. Some of them are actually little use. You can't refer to these branch lines or all branch lines and think that this is third-party access. Third-party access is to allow third-party operators outside those that are your clients to access the main facility that will actually allow them to even reach the port. But we must be careful. For third-party access to work, to be economic, to make sense for business to invest in it, we need to have high volumes, and I think they are available. We need to have long distance. If I'm only allowed a branch line and then Transnet then continues the journey, that is not third-party access. I need to have long distances to make economic value and control our destiny. If I cannot control my business, I'll have to rely on other people to make my business successful, and that doesn't work. I need to be able to control eventualities we know that for a fact that in certain instances where a certain operator should have been at a particular client, they never came. In some instances where you request a rate, the rate never comes, or it may come 3 months later. We cannot allow ourselves to operate in that fashion. Now, the role of supply chain to third-party access. There is going to be a lot of adapting and learning. In my short life in this industry of the railway sector, and coming generally from the engineering point of view, although I'm not an engineer and I don't intend to be one. When we procure or when we buy as supply chain professionals, we need to change. We cannot buy the cheapest. We need to understand what we buy. We need to learn what we buy. Don't be like me. When my first job, I didn't even know what a bolt looks like or even differentiate between bolt and a nut. Whatever you procure, you must be able to know it. You must be able to tell that if company A is charging 10 rand for this item, then company B is charging 2 rand for this item. You must be able to pick that up, because if that adapting and learning does not come through, the failures of companies is increased, and that is the risk that comes with third-party access and supply chain working together. For us to give a reliable service, we need a reliable supply chain that will be able to provide us with the services that we require. We need to collaborate. Rail industry cannot do this on their own. We need supply chain specialists. Are we going to buy online? We may be. But as a rail industry, I'm not buying HB pencils. I'm buying material that is highly technical. Do we have to get a supply chain professional that is only a supply chain professional in a technical adjudication committee? Or can I have an engineer first that will then train to be a supply chain professional so that we add value when we do tender adjudication? Because if you buy cheap, we pay twice. If Public Finance Management Act is telling you that you need to buy the cheapest, and you tell yourself that, okay, I'll buy the cheapest, but compromising the organization, how we contract is going to change. So instead of buying for Transnet, you may be buying for private sector. And private sector, it's about the value of a product that has been purchased. Not from the monetary point of view, but can I rely on the equipment that is bought? The equipment that I've bought is the only equipment that I can use to commit to a customer that I'll be able to deliver 1, 2, 3 under these conditions. We need private sector engagement with the profession itself. Is it time to professionalize supply chain individuals? How do we protect supply chain professionals from rogue elements within entities, within companies? How do you then stand up in the room and leave the room and say, I am not going to be part of this? How many supply chain individuals we have seen at the Zondo Commission? And the response is that my manager told me to do it. The responsibility with the decisions that you make to make the company successful relies on supply chain professionals. You are one of the most important link in the entire value chain to ensure that businesses work. But you must also be able to protect yourself again from rogue elements. If you need to leave the room, leave the room. Because your actions of not leaving the room may have dire consequences for the entire country. Referring to 1064. 1064 is a Transnet project. Instead of the industry, South African industry benefiting and creating jobs, it is that table that decided that we're going to take South African money and we're going to create jobs elsewhere. So the unemployment rate, high rate that we have in the country today, just didn't balloon out of nowhere. It's certain decisions that have been taken as state-owned entities and have used individuals within the supply chain to achieve their naughty objectives. So let's reassess that. Chartered accountants are quite particular. They protect their designation. And can we have the supply chain being professionalized? We rely on you, on the ethical decisions that you're going to take. We rely on you on the informed technical decisions that you're going to take. Even if you are not an engineer today, go into the plant and see what you're buying. Ask the engineer on site, what is the difference? That is a part of learning. So supply chain professionals, you owe it to the entire economy of South Africa to ensure that when we do procurement in the best interest of the country, particularly the organizations that we represent. I will end there. Thank you very much. And if there's questions, I'll take them on.
Do we have any questions from the audience? In the meantime, if everyone can go to the poll section and then rate Mesela's overall presentation, that was very informative. It seems like us supply chain professionals have a lot of work on our hands regarding this rail system. Just one question from my side. I mean, how long in the future can we see this change to be implemented? What time frame are we looking at?
Look, the president has given himself 12 months, and I've previously said that maybe my public education is limiting me, but 12 months from the 15th of October should be 14th of October this year, 2021. But we are engaging with government, and I need to point out that some government entities is difficult to engage. But Treasury has been one of the most easiest entities to engage. They are quite accessible. And in one instance, I got a letter posted from the minister. Department of Public Enterprises, also very accessible. They listen to the rail industry. They may not necessarily agree with us on everything else, but they agree that third-party access is required. And not only to benefit the private sector, but to benefit Transnet, because Transnet needs this money.
All right, thank you. We've got a question. The rolling stock industry has collapsed. How will private sector participants be enabled to execute without an available industry?
Well, I would argue against the word collapse. I would say, a nice political word, challenge. We still have companies that are manufacturing. TMH has recently invested in the country. They're currently surviving on, international market. We still have global engineering. We still have Gallison. And we still have companies that are component suppliers currently operating. Collapsed, can we maybe say the two entities have attempted to mega the industry? Can we say that the two entities, particularly PRASA, Do we trust the leadership that is in there? Do we trust the leadership that will make the best decision in interest of the business and their commuters? How can you expect PRASA to make sound decision, whereas the very same people that are on the board have never been in the industry before? They don't know that there is a certain process. For me to order a wheel, it must start somewhere. You can't give me a contract and say as and when. The rail sector is not pick and pay. We need commitment, long commitment, so that industry is able to invest. There are quite few innovations that are taking place in the industry. So the rolling stock may have had challenges, but we can't collapse because we don't have the right leadership in place. As private sector, let's come together under the organization and speak to industry, speak to government. In most instances, some of the organizations that I listen to is those that are shooting each other. But let's use our skills, our business acumen to speak to government. And after all, they say they're listening government. We need to speak to the president, the same person that has made that commitment. We need to tell him that it's time. We need to tell them that Transnet must open up the gates to transform this industry. This is not privatization. This is not white monopoly capital. This is me as a Black South African company, as a patriotic company, as a South African-based company that employs people in this country that say, give me access. And when I find the trucks on the N3, my son tells me that, Mom, it's your fault that there's so many trucks on the road. So I need all assistance from all quarters to join us on this journey to achieve third-party access, because the economy of this country relies on it. Our jobs, sustaining our jobs, relying on it. If tomorrow few companies close, we are not able to host this conference because fewer people will sign on. So it's the entire value chain, the economy of the country that is impacted. So join us as we march to achieve third-party access. Private sector doing business with private sector.
Thank you. That's powerful. We don't have much time, but I'm going to take one more question. Is the dug-out port project on the south coast of Durban still on the cards to go ahead at some point?
Sorry, come again?
Is the dug-out port project on the south coast of Durban still on the cards to go ahead at some point?
I'm not aware with that project, but what I can tell you that from the KZN point of view, the leadership has a vision to increase their GDP by between 10 to 15%. So as a rail industry, we are making few proposals to their development fund and also to the Premier's office. And the importance of unlocking business, unlocking or rather freeing up the port. So we're making few presentations, not necessarily related to that project, but quite a few presentations or possible projects, bankable projects are being negotiated or rather being lobbied with government.
All right, thank you. Gia, we don't have time for a question, but I think we can touch base with MESELA in one of the lounges and then have that discussion regarding women taking up opportunities in this third-party access railway system. Thank you for joining, everybody. Thank you, MESELA, for the presentation. We're gonna now break for lunch for about 30 minutes. In the meantime, take this opportunity to network, go to the lunch, grab something quickly to eat, and we'll log back in at 1:30 for the next presentations. Thank you so much, everybody.